Communication is inciting violence. How can we use it to incite peace? This is a slide from my 2012 PopTech Fellows presentation, and I was asking it about Kenya's then upcoming 2013 general elections. Together with a group of local peace activists, I'd examined the role that mobile technology, and text messaging in particular, had played in amplifying communications that prepared and mobilized people for Kenya's 2007 and 2008 post-election violence. And we wanted to use those same communication channels to mobilize for peace. So we started CC Amani Kenya, which means We Are Peace Kenya. We started with a new text messaging platform, and through grassroots and door-to-door outreach, we got 65,000 subscribers who signed up to receive our text messages. We reached them directly on their phones with critical civic education and civic engagement information. We also responded in real time to things like rumors and tensions in the communities where we worked. 92% of our subscribers thought that the messages we sent helped prevent violence in their communities. And 75% spent their own money to forward a message at least once. And when we did qualitative surveys of our subscribers, they revealed stories like that of a young man who had been ready to arm himself with his friends before he got a CC Amani text message and decided to go home. And so we started getting some requests from people who were interested in figuring out how to replicate this approach. And CC Amani had been part of PeaceText, which is a collaborative group that PopTech convened to bring organizations and experts together to think about the role that mobile technology could play in preventing violence. They'd supported our strategy along the way, and I'd already begun talking with many of them about the potential for replication. And I was convinced that if we could replicate anything about our work in Kenya successfully, it had to be the design approach we used. Where we were successful, it was because we understood the communities where we worked. We understood the connection between communication that happened through mobile phones and communication that happened in person. We'd figured out who was important, not just the young unemployed men at risk of participating in violence, also the young woman selling vegetables on the side of the road who was an important source of news and gossip for her community. And then we tried to understand as much as we could about these people so that we could craft messages that could really reach them and influence their behavior. So in 2014, after I transitioned CC Amani to 2 local civil society organizations, I was still bothered by this question. I wanted to think about what could be replicated. What did we know about how to use communication to create peace? Through a fellowship with the US Holocaust Memorial Museum, I explored this question more broadly, looking at the type of speech that increases the risk that people will either accept or participate in harm that's targeted at a group based solely on their identity, from discrimination to violence. We see this type of communication, often called hate speech, dangerous speech, or incitement, in many mass atrocity events through history, from the Holocaust to Rwanda, and we see it present today in places from Myanmar to here in the United States. And we're hearing about it more and more frequently, in part because new mediums like social media are enabling it to travel quickly across broader geographies than ever before, just like mobile phones enabled this type of communication to travel differently in Kenya than it had before. And the thing about this type of communication that really bothers me is that not only does it increase the risk of violence targeted towards a group, it also distracts us and divides us and prevents us from coming together to solve the critical challenges that we face, from climate change to natural disasters and health. And the thing is that this speech and this communication is really hard to counter. It's often very strategic and very effective. It taps into basic human emotions like fear, calling upon an outside threat as justification for violence. It also taps into our love and empathy for members of our own group, to our strong group identities and social norms, our fear of being socially ostracized. It also often taps into real felt grievances, whether political, economic, or otherwise. And so when it comes to figuring out how to deal with this type of speech and communication, our intuition about what will work often fails us. We end up wasting money on interventions that are ineffective. For example, they just preach to the choir, or they don't really resonate with the audiences that they are trying to influence. And these interventions can even cause harm. So our intuition often leads us to want to tackle people's beliefs. We think if we can provide them with facts, figures, and logic, we can change their mind. But that is not how human beings work. It's actually really hard to change someone's beliefs. We perceive any information that challenges our strongly held beliefs, especially if they relate to our identity, as a psychological threat. So we reject the information that challenges our beliefs and seek and accept information that supports them. And beyond this, efforts to correct beliefs can backfire. They can cause people to hold their existing beliefs even more strongly. This is how interventions can cause unintended harm, and it's just one example. And so since our intuition about what will work often fails, I wanted to figure out, what do we know that can help us? What do we know that can help us prevent causing unintended harm and help us create interventions that will really work? So I started exploring fields like marketing and communications, cognitive neuroscience, and behavioral and social psychology to figure out what they knew that could help us. I combined insights from all of these fields into a guide for organizations called Diffusing Hate. It walks them through a design process and brings in insights from all the fields that I mentioned and more to inform practitioners about potentially useful solutions and about risks that they can avoid. So for example, research suggests that we can reduce the risk of motivated reasoning by framing new information in terms of people's existing values, or by boosting their self-esteem before we psychologically threaten them. It also points to potentially different starting points. We might not actually want to start by trying to change people's beliefs. It turns out that changing social norms might actually be a more promising way to change their behavior. And so for me, this guide is a good start. It takes the knowledge that exists and that's out there, and it puts it at the disposals of practitioners who are trying to solve this challenge. But it's really not enough, because these approaches haven't yet been integrated and applied to this challenge. I've been drawing from research on things like climate change and vaccines, and methods and approaches used to sell products like Coca-Cola. It's a helpful start, but we need more. And so we're in a situation where we have this critical challenge, and our intuition about what will work often fails us. The current knowledge is a helpful start, but it's really not enough, and we need a new approach to solve this problem. And that's what my organization is doing. We're piloting an approach that starts with local practitioners who best understand their context. And it brings them together with experts from the fields that I just mentioned, from cognitive neuroscience to marketing. And we're facilitating a process where they'll work together through a design process to design, prototype, and test strategies that they think can work. We just launched our first pilot in Europe, and it's focused on addressing anti-Muslim and anti-refugee speech. And again, the idea here is to figure out what will work, to use an integrated, rigorous, scientific approach that is interdisciplinary so we can bring all the knowledge and skills to bear and figure out what can work. Because we know that communication is powerful. We see it used to incite violence. We need to be better and more strategic at using communication to prevent violence, discrimination, and hatred, and to instead empower communities to use communication to create an active peace and to come together to solve their most critical challenges. Thank you.